Get out of my house. You're not welcomed here anymore.
But before I dive into this explosive story, smash that subscribe button, turn on the bell, and comment where you're watching from. Because trust me, you don't want to miss the twist in this tale. The mansion trembled with the force of his words. The thunder outside cracked in response, heavy rain cascading against the tall glass windows. Sophia stood frozen at the doorway, her frail body trembling as she clutched her swollen belly. Her eyes, glistening with unshed tears, darted from her husband Gregory's enraged face to the woman behind him. His mistress, Elena, smug, arms crossed, lips curled into a venomous smirk. Sophia's voice shook, barely more than a whisper. "Gregory, I'm your wife. I'm carrying your child. Please." Gregory's jaw clenched, his eyes burning with cruel finality. "You're nothing to me anymore. You've been nothing but a burden. I found someone better, someone who actually deserves this life." His fingers shot toward Elena, who stepped forward like a queen claiming her throne. Elena tilted her head, her laughter soft but poisonous. "Didn't you hear him, Sophia? He doesn't want you here. You're pathetic. Look at you, pregnant and desperate. Move aside, darling. You're ruining the view." Sophia's knees wobbled, her heart breaking in ways words could never capture. She had built this home with Gregory. Every tile, every curtain, every dream they had chosen together. Now, she was nothing more than an inconvenience to him, discarded like trash. Her lips trembled as she spoke again. "Gregory, how can you do this? After everything, after the vows, the years, the promises?" Gregory's hand shot out, pointing to the rain-soaked night outside. His voice was sharp as a blade. "Promises? Don't make me laugh. The only promise I'll make to you is this. You'll never step foot in this house again. Not as long as I breathe." The words hit her harder than any slap. Her chest constricted, but she straightened, gripping her stomach protectively. The baby within her kicked faintly, as though sensing the chaos around them. Sophia's tears finally spilled, blurring her vision. With one last broken look at the man who had vowed to love her forever, she turned and stepped into the storm. The heavy oak doors slammed shut behind her with a finality that echoed in her soul. Rain drenched her instantly, soaking her dress until it clung to her skin. She stumbled onto the wet pavement, clutching her stomach tighter as sobs racked her chest. Each step away from the mansion felt like stepping further into the unknown. Alone, pregnant, abandoned. But in her silence, in her pain, something sparked deep within Sophia. It wasn't rage. It wasn't vengeance. It was survival. Inside, Elena wasted no time. The moment Sophia disappeared into the storm, she glided across the marble floor and into Gregory's arms. He held her close, his lips brushing her ear. "She's gone, Elena. It's you and me now. This house, this fortune, everything, it's ours." Elena smirked, casting a victorious glance at the rain-streaked windows. Good. She never belonged here anyway. Let her rot in the gutter where she came from. Gregory chuckled, lifting a glass of brandy from the table. "She'll learn quickly that the world has no place for weak women like her." He raised his glass. To us. To power. But neither Gregory nor Elena realized that what they had set in motion that night would one day become their undoing. For Sophia, the following weeks were a blur of hardship. With no home to return to and no family willing to take her in, she wandered from place to place, doing whatever she could to survive. Her belly grew heavier with each passing day, her body aching from exhaustion. She scrubbed floors in strangers' homes. She washed dishes at small diners where the owners pitied her. She mopped grocery store aisles late into the night, earning just enough to buy bread and keep herself alive. Every job, every insult hurled at her for being a single pregnant woman, cut deep, but she never broke. Each time she felt her baby kick inside her, Sophia whispered through her tears, "I'll make it for you. I'll survive for you." And survive she did. There were nights she slept on benches, her dress her only blanket. There were days she ate nothing, choosing instead to save her coins for a piece of fruit for the child she carried. But with every struggle, her spirit grew tougher, harder, sharper. Sophia was no longer the naive woman who had once stood trembling in that mansion doorway. She was becoming something else, a fighter, a survivor, a mother forged in fire. Meanwhile, Gregory and Elena basked in their newfound freedom. The mansion became a playground for their indulgence. Lavish parties filled the once quiet halls. Expensive champagne flowed like water, and money was spent recklessly. Elena draped herself in jewels, her laughter echoing through the house Sophia once kept warm with love. But beneath the glitter, cracks were forming. Gregory's empire began to falter. Deals slipped through his fingers, investments soured, and whispers of corruption started to circle. Elena, ever the opportunist, pushed him to spend more, to live larger, to flaunt his wealth as though it would never run dry. Gregory ignored the warnings. "I'm untouchable," he often said. But fate has a way of humbling even the proudest kings. One stormy night, years later, as Sophia rocked her child to sleep in their small but safe home, a headline blared across the news. Gregory Hensley's fortune in jeopardy. CEO faces mounting debt and health crisis. Sophia looked at the screen, her lips curling into the faintest smile. Her heart no longer ached for him. Instead, she whispered to her child, "Do you see my love? Karma is real. What's done in the dark always finds its way to the light." Thus the stage was set. A woman who had been cast aside was slowly rising, and the man who had once thrown her to the wolves was beginning to face them himself. The rain that once swallowed her tears became the rhythm of her grind. Sophia worked until her hands blistered and her back screamed from bending over mop handles and scrubbing brushes. Her swollen belly grew heavier each day, but she never slowed, never begged, never looked back at the gates of the mansion that had shut her out. In diners, her uniform reeked of grease and soap. In grocery stores, the floors gleamed from her midnight shifts, and in every whispered insult about a pregnant girl abandoned by her husband, she found a strange kind of fuel. The world wanted her broken, but she decided to turn every wound into armor. Her baby was born in the middle of that chaos, not in luxury, but in the corner of a clinic with flickering lights and thin sheets. When she held her child, warmth spread through her chest, stronger than any diamond Gregory had ever given her. That small heartbeat against her own was a reminder this was no ending. It was the birth of her second life. From that day forward, she no longer survived for herself. She survived for her child. The days blurred into years, and Sophia refused to be crushed by poverty. She picked up every shift, took every opportunity, and even educated herself at night when the baby finally slept. She sat under dim lamps, devouring books about business, finance, and leadership while the world thought she was only a janitor. Where Gregory and his mistress flaunted money recklessly in parties and scandals, Sophia learned the language of resilience, of patience, of silent building. Her path was brutal, but the universe began to shift in her favor. A kind restaurant owner noticed her determination and promoted her from dishwasher to manager. A local councilwoman admired her strength and gave her a chance to coordinate a community project. Step by step, Sophia transformed the pity of others into respect, and respect into influence. She was no longer the desperate woman begging at Gregory's feet. She was becoming a force he could never have imagined. Gregory, meanwhile, sat at the head of tables dripping with wine and money, blinded by his mistress's whispers. Elena demanded more vacations, more jewelry, more power, and he gave without question, certain his empire was indestructible. But the cracks widened. Markets shifted, competitors closed in, and scandals gnawed at his reputation. His name, once a symbol of dominance, began to tremble on the lips of his business partners. Behind every smile at his parties were whispers of his reckless spending and Elena's unrelenting greed. As Sophia's world expanded, his world shrank. She built networks, met allies, and found doors opening where she once only saw walls. By the time Gregory realized his empire was slipping, Sophia was already building her own, quietly, steadily, without a trace of the woman who once sobbed in the rain. The balance of power was changing, though he couldn't see it yet. His body began to betray him, too. Chest pains came with alarming frequency. Breathlessness followed him upstairs, but pride made him ignore every warning. The man who had roared at Sophia with disdain now wheezed behind closed doors, hiding from the very mistress who drained his wealth as fast as he earned it. Sophia raised her child with dignity, teaching them resilience, discipline, and strength. She told stories of hardship without bitterness, stories of betrayal without tears. In her silence was a victory already forming, a quiet promise to herself that one day the tables would turn. And as the years rolled forward, her quiet victories grew louder. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was rising. And Gregory, who once believed he was untouchable, was inching toward a fall so devastating that even his mistress would not stand by his side. The walls of Gregory's empire began to tremble long before he acknowledged it. His arrogance had built a fortress so high he could not see the cracks forming beneath his feet. Deals that once came easily began slipping away. Investors grew wary of his lavish parties and Elena's notorious spending. Behind the polished smiles of boardrooms, whispers spread that Gregory Hensley was no longer the untouchable giant he once claimed to be. But pride made him blind. He poured money into Elena's every demand, convinced that appearances alone could hold his kingdom together. Elena, draped in diamonds and silk, was relentless. She wanted more luxury, more control, more validation of her place at his side. To her, Sophia was a shadow long forgotten, a ghost banished from their gilded world. Gregory obliged every whim, even as the coffers began to thin, even as his body ached and his health faltered. He drowned his weakness in champagne, masking every cough with laughter, dismissing every dizzy spell as exhaustion. But the truth was unavoidable. His power was waning. Far from his crumbling empire, Sophia thrived. The woman who once scrubbed floors with swollen hands had transformed into a leader whispered about with admiration and fear. Her quiet determination turned into influence. Her influence turned into authority. She no longer asked for a seat at the table. She owned the table. Her community projects became citywide initiatives. Her sharp mind earned her partnerships with powerful figures, and the networks she built grew into a foundation that touched every corner of the state. People who once pitted her now sought her counsel, and those who mocked her name now carried it on their tongues with reverence. Her child, once the reason she pushed through long nights, stood tall beside her, a living reminder of her resilience. Every step she had taken in pain and humiliation became fuel for her ascent. The image of Gregory's disdainful sneer still lingered in her memory, but it no longer cut her. It sharpened her. Each success was another stone laid on the path of justice. Gregory's descent became public spectacle. The once celebrated tycoon now faced lawsuits from former allies, bankruptcies clawing at his empire, and whispers of corruption that no amount of charm could silence. Business journals once filled with his triumphs now detailed his failures. The public, once eager to bask in his glory, now feasted on his downfall. Elena's love, too, began to wither. Without the constant stream of wealth to feed her desires, she grew restless, her eyes wandering toward newer, wealthier prey. Gregory, who had once mocked Sophia for her poverty, now found himself clinging desperately to the same luxury he had weaponized against her. At night, when his chest burned with pain and his thoughts turned heavy, Gregory finally allowed the truth to creep in. He remembered the parking lot, the moment Sophia's tearful eyes had pleaded for mercy as he cast her aside. He remembered the cruelty of his words, the arrogance that had made him believe she was beneath him. And now, as he sat alone in mansions that felt colder with every passing day, he realized that the woman he had discarded had built a legacy while his own crumbled like dust. Sophia never gloated. She never needed to. Her silence became the loudest victory of all. For every step Gregory fell, she rose higher. For every dollar he lost, her wealth multiplied. She invested where he squandered, she built where he destroyed, and her name became synonymous with power he could no longer comprehend. The irony was cruel and perfect. While his mistress drained him of the last remnants of his pride, Sophia rebuilt herself into the woman he once swore she could never be. Elena's betrayal struck the final blow. When his accounts dipped too low to satisfy her, when the jewels stopped arriving and the champagne grew flat, she walked away without hesitation. Her departure was cold, calculated, and final. Gregory, who had sacrificed everything for her, was left with nothing but hospital bills, fading strength, and memories of a life built on arrogance. The newspapers reported it mercilessly. The tycoon abandoned, the empire dissolved, the mistress gone. Sophia, meanwhile, stood at the helm of her empire, her presence commanding respect in every room she entered. She wore power not as a crown, but as armor forged from every scar he had left her with. To the world, she was a success story. To Gregory, she was a reminder of karma's unyielding hand. He saw her name on billboards, her speeches replayed on news networks, her influence spreading through every corridor of the state. The contrast was unbearable. Once, he had believed her unworthy of even standing in a shadow. Now, he lived in the shadow of her greatness. Every headline was a dagger. Every mention of her name was a mirror reflecting his failure. His heart, already weakened by illness, ached with the weight of regret. But pride still lingered, even in his darkest moments. He convinced himself that perhaps, if he begged, she might forgive him, that the woman he had cast into the rain might still have mercy. But Sophia had no desire for revenge in the way he imagined. Her vengeance was her life, rebuilt and stronger than ever. Her vengeance was the silent reminder that she had risen without him, that his cruelty had forged a strength he could never destroy. She had already won. As Gregory's world grew smaller, confined to hospital rooms and empty halls, Sophia's continued to expand. Invitations to galas, boardrooms, and political events poured in. She had become a symbol of resilience, the woman who defied the odds and rewrote her story. And though she never spoke his name, though she never acknowledged his existence, Gregory knew deep in his heart that her silence was deliberate. She didn't need to confront him. Life had already done that for her. Gregory Hensley's world had collapsed into shadows and silence. The man who once commanded rooms with a raised eyebrow now found himself wheezing in sterile hospital beds, his empire scattered into lawsuits, his so-called friends evaporated like smoke. The mistress he had destroyed his family for had left him with nothing but a bitter perfume lingering on silk sheets she did not bother to take. Every corner of the mansion screamed emptiness. His wealth had been siphoned into Elena's vanity and his endless treatments, his company torn apart by shareholders who no longer saw value in the name Hensley. What remained was a man with failing health, no allies, and memory sharp enough to cut him. He could not escape Sophia. Her face was everywhere, on magazines praising her philanthropy, on business news channels reporting her investments, on billboards where she was celebrated as one of the most influential women in the state. The irony twisted the knife. Her empire now rivaled the one he had once used to crush her. Every mention of her name was a reminder of his cruelty, of the night he threw her out into the rain while Elena moved into her place. He remembered the look in Sophia's eyes that night, the disbelief, the silent pain. He had laughed, called her useless, claimed she was nothing without him. Now, he was the one reduced to nothing. The sickness gnawed at him, a heart that faltered under every beat. His doctor spoke in hushed tones about failure, transplants, long shots. His body weakened, but his pride still whispered lies. Maybe, he thought, Sophia would forgive him if he begged. Maybe she would see the man she once loved, not the monster he became. In his desperation, he convinced himself that mercy still lingered in her heart. The day he dragged himself to her doorstep was overcast, the sky heavy with clouds, as if even heaven refused to look at him. Gone was the chauffeur. Gone was the Rolls-Royce. He arrived in a battered sedan borrowed from a cousin who barely tolerated him. His suit, once custom-tailored, hung loose on his frail frame. His skin was pale, his movements sluggish, but his eyes burned with the faint spark of arrogance that refused to die. He clutched the doorframe of Sophia's grand estate, a property so vast it made his crumbling mansion look like a cottage. Guards recognized him instantly, but they did not bow. They did not usher him in with reverence. They looked at him with cold detachment, waiting for Sophia's command. She appeared, not as the broken woman he remembered, but as a queen in her own right. Draped in power that required no jewels, her presence alone silenced the air. Behind her stood her child, now grown, a reminder of the legacy he had once tried to erase. The resemblance to him was undeniable, but so too was the strength in their posture, the pride inherited not from Gregory, but from Sophia's unyielding spirit. Gregory opened his mouth, but no words came. His throat tightened, his body trembling. Finally, the plea stumbled out, jagged and raw. He begged. He admitted failure, spoke of illness, of regret. He reached for her mercy like a drowning man reaching for a rope. He expected tears, maybe even a flicker of pity, but Sophia's eyes held none. They were steady, cold, and resolute. She listened, her expression carved from stone, the weight of years pressing between them. Her silence was heavier than any curse. She let him speak, let him choke on desperation, let him unravel until his knees buckled on the marble floor of her entryway. The once powerful millionaire now knelt before the woman he had discarded, his hands trembling, his voice cracking, begging for the same compassion he had once mocked. But Sophia had no intention of saving him. She had survived his cruelty, rebuilt herself from ashes, and risen to a power he could not comprehend. She owed him nothing. When she finally spoke, her words cut cleaner than a blade. She reminded him of a night he had thrown her into the rain, pregnant and alone. She recalled the laughter in his voice as he replaced her with Elena, the disdain in his eyes when she begged for a chance. She painted each memory with surgical precision, forcing him to relive the cruelty he thought he'd buried. And then she told him the truth he had feared. Karma had come full circle. He would suffer the way he made her suffer. His loneliness mirrored her nights of despair. His sickness mirrored the wounds he inflicted. His emptiness mirrored the void he created. Gregory wept, his sobs echoing through the grand estate. But Sophia did not bend. Her victory was not in revenge delivered with rage, but in the silent justice of her existence. She had become everything he swore she never would. She stood tall, wealthy, powerful, adored, while he knelt, broken, forgotten, and desperate. The world had already judged him. His downfall was complete. She dismissed him with the same finality he once used against her. The door closed, not with anger, but with the cold indifference of someone who no longer carried his weight in her heart. Gregory staggered back, the rejection hitting harder than any illness. He shuffled away from her estate, shoulders slumped, realizing the truth he could no longer deny. Sophia had been his equal, his partner, his chance at love, and he had thrown it away for greed and lust. Now, he faced the consequences alone. News of his humiliation spread quietly at first, whispers in business circles, murmurs among former friends. But soon it became public knowledge. The once mighty Gregory Hensley had begged his ex-wife for mercy, only to be turned away. People called it poetic justice, karma in motion, a fitting end for a man who had built his empire on arrogance. Sophia never spoke of it. She didn't need to. Her silence screamed louder than any headline. In the final days of his life, Gregory replayed that moment over and over. The sight of Sophia, standing tall, the child he had rejected standing proudly beside her, the cold dismissal that mirrored his own cruelty. He realized too late that power, wealth, and pride mean nothing when stripped of compassion. His empire crumbled, his mistress abandoned him, his health failed, and in the end, the only person who could have saved him chose justice instead of mercy. Sophia never looked back. She continued to lead, to inspire, to build a legacy not marred by cruelty, but defined by resilience. Her story became a testament whispered in boardrooms and classrooms alike. That dignity outlasts arrogance, that truth outshines lies, and that karma spares no one. Gregory's name faded, but Sophia's only grew brighter. And as the years rolled on, his downfall became nothing more than a cautionary tale, while her life remained a symbol of triumph born from pain. And so, the man who once threw his pregnant wife into the rain, who mocked her tears and replaced her with a mistress, was left to beg at the very door he once slammed in her face. But this time, no mercy waited. Karma doesn't forget. It only arrives when you least expect it. If you believe what goes around always comes around, smash that like button, subscribe right now, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. Because stories like this, they remind us all, the tables always turn.